Welcome into Studio A for an all-new episode of All-American. I'm Maria Trivelpeice alongside Kyle Youmans. Kyle, so many American teams in action last week. We're going to talk about all of them. What are you most excited about for today?
Oh, my gosh. It's the fact that we have a full slate of conference games to talk about last week. We almost have an entire slate to talk about this week. We've got 3 bowl-eligible teams, 2 teams that are fighting for that 6th win this week against each other, North Texas and Tulane, 2 5-2 teams that can work into bowl eligibility in their own right. And then, of course, we've got 2 ranked teams that are both military academies, both with Heisman hopefuls at quarterback. There's so much to talk about. I love every single bit of it.
You gave a quick little synopsis, and you mentioned those 2 teams sitting at the top of the American Athletic Conference standing. So we got to take a look at the entire slate because you mentioned those bowl-eligible teams. Army and Navy, though, at the top, Tulane right behind them. What stands out to you about these standings so far?
Well, what stands out is how right that everybody has been on All-American. Yourself, myself, Morgan Uber previously about how this thing could shape out up to this point. Army and Navy are legitimate powerhouses, and we've been saying that since week 1. Nobody believed us, but here they are, putting them inside the top 25 for the first time together for quite some time. Of course, now they're in there for the 2nd week together, and they'll have a chance to continue that moving forward. Tulane is still the real deal. They played a game against Rice. We'll break it down a little bit later on with our special guest, James Westling, who will join the show later. But that Tulane team did not play well, but good teams find a way to win whenever they play their worst games of the year. They did so on the road or at home against the Rice Owls, and they go to 3-1. And then Memphis, North Texas was a classic of a football game. Lots of things on that left side of the screen to talk about, and the unfortunate side of it is if the left side's having success, that means the right side of the screen is not. Those teams trying to get out of that right side and get right back into the winning ways.
Well, we said last week that this past week was going to really start to separate some of those teams, right? We're going to see who is the real deal. We've been saying Army and Navy are the real deal, as you said, from the beginning. So I think we saw a little bit of that separation play out, and we're going to see probably even more separation as we head into this week. But Army and Navy, Kyle, let's start with the midshipmen.
Love it. Beat
Charlotte this weekend. Man, they look just as good as they have the entire season.
No doubt about it. And Navy is a juggernaut. 51-17. We went into this matchup thinking Charlotte had some momentum, had some confidence, and they did. And this is a team that can run the football effectively, but this isn't the Navy midshipmen. And I think Navy showed it off with their weapons outside of Blake Horvath. And we've talked about Horvath and what he's done. He's phenomenal. He's still a very efficient passer. He's still doing everything he needs to. But this was the Alex Teska game, and you can see why here on the left sideline. Alex Teska, the fullback, takes it to the house as a receiver, as a running back. He knows how to do a backflip, which I think is impressive in its own right. But he's been so good throughout the year, and he's just one of multiple weapons that Horvath has to throw the football. Navy improving to 6-0 for the first time since 1979. Teska scored the 3 touchdowns in the first quarter to continue what has been a great year for the midshipmen. I really was impressed with the all-around performance that they showed in Annapolis.
Yeah, you mentioned that Navy offense, but the defense looked really good as well. We'll get to see Deshaun Peele do a little bit of something later in the show, but he had 2 pick-sixes in the game. He's only the 2nd player in American Athletic Conference history to do that, the first in Navy history to have 2 in one game. And so offensively, Navy looked really good, but how about that defense as well?
No, so good. The turnovers put pressure on Charlotte because they came out, and we talked about the discipline and the angles that this Navy defense takes to a ball carrier, to an offense on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage. It was the turnovers that helped set the tone against the 49ers, who then started to press, and then they couldn't slow down the Navy offense, and it created this snowball effect that continued to grow and grow as the game went on. So whenever you have back-to-back pick-sixes like Deshaun Peele ended up having, one from 61 yards out, one from 84 yards out, 5 turnovers forced by this Navy defense, the most since 2019 for the midshipmen. All of those things play together in what ended up being a blowout victory. It wasn't just one element, and that's what's dangerous about this top 25 Navy team, is the fact that it's not just one element that they're good at. Can they run the ball? Yes. Can they throw it in the sling T offense? Absolutely. Blake Horvath's shown that throughout the year so far. Can they play defense? Absolutely, even without turnovers. Oh, by the way, whenever you mix in and sprinkle in 5 turnovers in one game, they show that they're the real deal all the way across the board, and that doesn't even count special teams and what they can do there.
So the real deal with the real test this weekend. We thought that Charlotte might be able to cause Navy some problems, but the midshipmen did what they were supposed to do in that matchup. But Notre Dame, a much anticipated matchup. And, I'm excited about this one. I'll give you some more reasoning later. But first, your overall thoughts. Navy, Notre Dame. Can the midshipmen come away with a victory in this one?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite matchups of the year. It's because it has a little bit of everything. I just talked about the well-roundedness of Navy as a team. How about this matchup in terms of being well-rounded as a matchup? The audience, it's going to be on ABC, national television. First game of the day, following right after College game day, going right into it. The atmosphere, Metlife Stadium, a professional sports venue. Navy is going to travel. Notre Dame is going to travel. They have the brands, the gold domes between both teams. They played each other so much. The quarterbacks, they have quarterbacks that are both phenomenal. Riley Leonard for Notre Dame, who was, of course, at Duke last year and had a ton of success and was in the Heisman conversation at least for a little bit before he got hurt. And then you've got Horvath, who might be in the Heisman conversation right now.
Heisman.
Horvath for Heisman, baby. Somebody give me the shirts. The history between these two is phenomenal as well. 97th all-time meeting between the two. And I really liked what CBS sports analyst Adam Brenneman said on social media this week, and I'll take his quote word for word here. I guarantee you Marcus Freeman is not sleeping tonight thinking about how he's going to stop this Navy offense. Of course, Freeman being the head coach of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I think that's an understatement. He hasn't slept all week, Adam, in terms of trying to figure out how to slow down Horvath and how to slow down the Navy midshipmen. This is not an easy matchup for a top 15 Notre Dame team. And if Navy really wants to take advantage of the opportunity that's presented in front of them, they turn into not only a threat in the American, but a nationwide threat to make the college football playoff.
No, and I'll play off your point there of what Adam said as well. I was watching one of Marcus Freeman's press conferences, right? And he talked so much about the upcoming matchup. He said the offensive scheme is enhanced from last year. He said they're tremendous both offensively and defensively, and the turnover battle, which we just got done talking about. So he is already checking off all of these boxes of trying to figure out how he's going to play and prepare for this Navy team. And I think that I know everybody is picking Notre Dame to everybody's picking Notre Dame to win. I'm picking Navy to win this game right here on All-American. Kyle has the American Conference ball right there.
Grab the helmet.
I think that they have the momentum. I think that Notre Dame's a little bit banged up, right? I think that Navy can win this game.
Yes.
And we're calling it right here. I mean, you can disagree with me, but I'm making my statement, and maybe I'll look silly, but I have faith in the midshipmen to make me look good.
I love it. I love making a call. I'm not going to steal any thunder from your call. I'm not going to disagree at all.
Okay.
I'm not making a pick right now.
Okay.
I will make my pick Saturday morning on X, as I normally do. But I don't necessarily I think they have an absolute shot to win this football game. And we're going to see it. I don't think it'll be a blowout one way or the other. And honestly, if I think it is going to be a blowout, it may be a blowout for Navy, which might be an indication of who I'm picking going into the week. So something to keep an eye on and a phenomenal matchup nonetheless. I'm really excited about the 97th all-time meeting between Navy and Notre Dame from MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey this weekend. But speaking of Navy, there's another team that's undefeated right now that's having a little bit of success. Let's hear from head coach of the Army Black Knights, Jeff Monken, and what he exactly thinks about this Navy Midshipman Ball Club.
Has the thought crossed your mind yet that, hey, we might be playing Navy in the conference championship, and then, of course, for the Army-Navy game the next week, that you guys might be playing back-to-back games?
Do they still have a football program at that
school? Love it.
Undefeated.
Yeah, pretty good.
Pretty good football team. Pretty good football team up there. Pat had it right. His crew had it right.
Pretty good, right?
I like it. And I know you're one for pettiness all the way through. You love the pettiness back and forth. Army had the initial shot, the shot across the bow, as we're talking military analogies here.
Shot heard around the world, too.
Exactly.
That's another one.
And then Navy turns around and they return fire saying, oh, Mr. Monken, you know what it means to be a Navy midshipman. I love this back and forth. We're not even in November yet. We're in the middle of October, and we're still talking trash between two undefeated programs.
I live for this, right? Because I think that, first of all, both of these two programs are performing on the field. They both look great. But the fact of the admin, stepping in and you know what? We have a photo of you, Mr. Monken, from when you coached here at the Naval Academy and had success here as well. So let's just pull that up. And so I like the shots fired, back and forth between these two military academies. Ooh, December cannot come fast enough. Yeah. I cannot wait for this. And, I always love a little bit of pettiness. And I think that's fun, exciting. Fun. And we're just going to keep – here on All-American, I'll keep adding some gas to the fire.
Yeah. They're doing plenty of that themselves.
Yeah, I didn't even have to do anything. I called for pettiness my first week on the show, and they said, you know what, Maria, we'll deliver.
We got you. Yeah,
definitely a lot of fun there.
I love it. Add the fuel to the fire that's already there. These two programs, of course, do not like each other in terms of football. And it's shaping up to be the best Army-Navy showdown since the 1940s, if we're being completely honest, because of all the things that are happening between the two programs. The talent level is just tremendous. I mean, these are two really good football programs, both of which will have a shot at a common opponent in Notre Dame coming up very soon. I'm interested to see how they both fare against another team that's inside the top 20 right now. So still a long way to go, but this type of stuff is what I'm talking about. Let's
we
keep
live
it
for this. Give me more petty social media posts, and we will highlight them here on All-American.
Bang.
And we'll break them down as
Love it. East Carolina fell to Army this weekend, though, 45-28. Speaking about on the field, they scored on the first offensive drive again, Maria. This Army team is just tremendous when it comes off to getting off to a hot start. Touchdown on an opening drive in every single game. They have not trailed at any point this season. Only they and Indiana are the only teams that have done so going into this past weekend. They've won every game by double digits. They have just absolutely dominated their schedule to this point. Now, they haven't played the toughest part of their schedule yet, so there's still some things coming up. But just based off of what you saw from Army taking down East Carolina this weekend, what stuck out to you?
Well, I think it's just what I've seen from Army this entire season. It's the mentality of playing from ahead, because I think that teams, when they're preparing to play Army or even Navy for that matter, they have to prepare differently, right? So I think that by Army scoring on these first drives, you're already playing into the nervousness that these teams feel stepping onto the field with them, because they know that it's a different look than what they're going to see against really any other opponent that they play. And so I think it's a correlation. I talk about sports for a living. I don't do math. That's what I tell everyone all the time. I like numbers, but the correlation, what was it, proofs that you learned in school? I don't like that. But I think that there's a direct correlation in the fact that Army is winning games because of the way that they score and they get out early. They take that lead and they never let their opponents back into the game, and I think that's where the mentality comes in. And I mean, already Army football players, Army cadets have a different kind of mentality than other people. They decided to serve their country. They decided to dedicate their lives to something bigger than themselves. So that mental toughness aspect comes in. You see it play out against ECU, and I think that's why Army's winning games, because they get out early.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think one of the more impressive things, too, is, of course, they're running the option. They're running that gun option and what they've done for years and years and years with Army. But it's the fact that they've done it through the passing game, too, early. I mean, it was another passing touchdown on the opening drive that started the scoring for Army, which you're spending this entire week preparing for the top rushing attack in all of college football right now. You're expecting them to run the ball, and they come out so early and they pass it as effectively as Bryson Daly and this offense does. Defenses don't know how to respond. They don't know how to really turn around and change their game plan to combat something like that. That's why they've scored on the opening drive in every game this year, and they've done it through the air multiple times. FAU, Rice, now ECU. I mean, that's not even it. There's a couple other ones where they've scored on the opening drive of the game through the air. So when that dominant ground game does exactly what they've done all year long, which is run opponents over and over and over again, it's fun to watch. Now, this thing doesn't go the same way without Bryson Daly as quarterback. And I saw a tweet this week. I don't know who it was from, and I wish I could give credit, but they said that I think it's getting to the point where he's convinced that they're testing a super soldier serum on Bryson Daly, and he's just bringing it to the football field. I mean, the strength is unmatched. The running ability is incredible. And the fact that he's turned around and he's been so efficient through the air with 7 passing touchdowns and yet to throw an interception, it's getting to the point where it's unbelievable what Bryson Daly is doing.
I don't know if it's a serum. I've been calling him a video game character because he had the stiff arm, he had the spin move this week, he had the jump against Temple, and you look at the way that he just carries himself too when he was on All-American, just the confidence that he shows. It's confidence, it's personality. That's what you want in somebody who's going to be leading your offense. He's the AP National Player of the Week this week, Kyle. He finished with 171 yards rushing on 31 carries. He had 6 touchdowns for the Army Black Knights. So video game.
How many was it?
6.
6?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, some people don't score 6 touchdowns in a season.
Yeah, and there was a little note down there. It's like he's tied the single season touchdown rushing record
That was the minor
already.
note on the thing?
Yeah, that was like a small one.
Yeah.
They still have 5 games left. I mean,
5 games.
They've got so much time left in this season, and that doesn't even count the fact that they may play for an American Conference Championship as well if they continue on this route. Now, I mentioned it a moment ago. The toughest part of their schedule is still in front of them.
Yes.
They've got the bye week this week. They get a week off, which is well-earned after winning 5 straight after their initial bye week back in week 3. But then they go Air Force, North Texas. So rivalry game, of course, you know how that happens in the Commander-in-Chief Trophy. You cannot count out any team inside that rivalry. Then you've got North Texas, a team that if you are going to have some trouble keeping pace with, it will be the Mean Green because of their offense. We'll talk about a little bit about that later on. Then another bye week. Then they've got Notre Dame. And then they've got UTSA. And then it's the conference title, then it's Navy. So there's still a lot of great football to be played. Toughest part of their schedule is still in front of this Army team. They just got to continue doing what they've been doing, and they might be just fine working into that December matchup maybe 1 or 2 times against the Navy midshipmen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, tough schedule that you just listed off, but I just want to see them keep at what they've been doing, and I think that they'll be in a good spot for sure.
Now, the team that they did defeat, the East Carolina Pirates, they did announce a leadership change up front. Mike Houston, the head coach, who had been the head coach for a couple of different years with East Carolina, no longer the head coach, and he was hired, of course, back in 2018, been around. He was 27-39 overall as a head coach with the Pirates. This is a decision I thought came a little bit early for me, at least in the season, and we've talked very highly of East Carolina. Now, the 3-4 start is not ideal, but they've got teams like Temple, Florida Atlantic, and Tulsa coming up. This team very easily could be 6-4 in a year where, of course, they're coming off of a 2-10 record last year. So I thought the timing was a little bit interesting. Blake Harrell, who was the defensive coordinator, he's been around for 5 years. He steps into that head coaching role now that Mike Houston has gone, but it is just kind of an interesting turn of events as John Gilbert, the director of athletics at ECU, made the decision earlier in the week.
Yep. He said that, Mike Houston led the program the last 5 years, did a tremendous job with all those different classes, and they're just looking to go a different direction, and then they'll have Blake Harrell at the helm.
Yeah. I don't want to get into it because we're not in those meetings. We're not in the different mindset. And I just in talking to those that have been around the ECU program the last couple of years, I've had the pleasure of meeting many, many great people out there. I know there was some murmurs just about the on the field product and going 2-10 last year, having just one win in the American. That's tough. That's tough on a program. But you look at the way that they started this year, they've already elapsed that win total from what they had last year because they have the 3 wins. You drop a tough one against a really good Army team. You dropped one against Charlotte. I think that one hurt the most probably was the fact that you got blown out by an in-state rival like the Charlotte 49ers. But you have winnable games on the horizon that you can get back to a bowl game like you were in 2022, like you were in 2021, and get back to the winning ways that Mike Houston has shown you throughout his tenure with East Carolina. But they felt like it was the right decision to move on. Harrell, of course, he's been around the program. I'm interested to see how they respond going into this matchup against Temple this week. Temple, of course, we'll talk about them a little bit later on as well. They're coming off of a high. They got a win last week in a big way against Tulsa. So lots to look forward to for ECU and wishing the best to Mike Houston as well as he continues his coaching career elsewhere outside of the East Carolina program. All right, now moving on to what was my game of the week last week. KY's game of the week. The Memphis Tigers taking down the North Texas Mean Green in an absolute shootout of a game. almost 100 points, more than 1,200 yards, I think, combined between the two sides. And Memphis comes out on top in a tight one. 52-44, the final score from Liberty Stadium out there. I'm interested to see how this Memphis team can build on top of this, because we've talked about them as a contender in the conference. They showed it again against the Mean Green.
Well, I was a little bit surprised by this score, right? Because I know that we've talked so much about how good North Texas's offense is, right?
Yeah.
And Chandler Morris just absolutely fantastic. DT Sheffield was incredible in this game. But a big storyline that we emphasized this entire year has been Memphis's defense, right? And so I was so impressed with the way that North Texas's offense kind of handled the defense pretty well. Now, I think that goes to show you that I want to see North Texas's defense step up a little bit more, because I think obviously that's the difference in this game. But man, this was an exciting one, just back and forth the entire night, and the offenses really showed up. Yeah,
this was only the second or the third time in the season that a team had scored multiple touchdowns against the Memphis defense. The first one was Troy, where they scored 17 points against Memphis in week 2. And then the second one was the 44 points that, or 56 points rather, that Navy scored against Memphis in the one Memphis lost this year. So the fact that not only North Texas scored on their first 2 plays from scrimmage, but the fact that they put up 44 points was impressive from North Texas, and there's a lot to build on there. But Memphis, the way that they controlled the line of scrimmage was significant. They dominated up front. Mario Anderson and company had a phenomenal day. 5 lead changes. They jumped out in front with 9:23 to play because of the Mario Anderson touchdown, who, of course, had 4 touchdowns on the ground, tying the Memphis program record in doing so.
I was going to say, I'm looking at his numbers one more time, and
incredible.
I can't, but like, I was looking at them as we were preparing for the show, and then I just looked down at my notes again. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot just how good he was on Saturday.
Yeah, and we talked about him on this show before. We've actually had him on the show before. Honorable mention, I think, doesn't really do him the justice in needing into what he did. I mean, 183 yards, 22 carries, tying the program singles game mark. All of that is there, but also just the consistency that Memphis continues to show. This is now a team that's bowl eligible for the 11th consecutive season. Tying the longest stretch of any non-Power 5 team in the country is a note that they had from their SID department. They continue to win football games, and they do it in a multitude of ways. Some days it's Mario Anderson. Some days it's Seth Hennigan. Some days it's this defense. They're well-rounded to the point where I still think they're a contender in terms of the college football playoff, and there's a long way to go in the season if they continue to run the table like they have, and this is a big check mark to get out of the way. They certainly have a shot.
This was that one game that I was circling that I was like, this is going to start to tell us where teams line up. And I think Memphis is still getting lost in the shuffle, because we're talking about the Tulane, the Army, the Navy, and they are lurking. Like, that was the best analogy that you could have given. And I think that we're going to see them continue to lurk. They have Charlotte coming up. So how do they continue with what they've been doing so far that people aren't really talking about enough?
Yeah, Charlotte, UTSA, Rice, UAB. I think those are all games that Memphis expects to win. Those teams are going to be desperate at some point in time, so they're going to give a challenge, and Memphis has a target on their back. But then it's a bye week in Week 13. Week 14, here comes the Tulane Green Wave. That's going to be a fun one. At Yulman Stadium, too, down in New Orleans. Those two, that might be, if all else kind of falls into place for Tulane, falls into place for Memphis, that could be a game to play in to the American Conference Championship game. That might be for a spot in the title game later in the year. So keep in mind this Memphis team as they continue to win big games like this one against North Texas. Credit to North Texas. We'll talk about them in a moment. But I'm really interested to see how they continue to grow on it. Now, the Charlotte 49ers, this is a team that needs to rebound a little bit. Whenever you look at their loss, the 51-17 loss to Navy, we just talked about the Navy midshipmen and how they controlled that football game. Charlotte can run the football. We've seen that already this year. They have to get back to that and control some time of possession and the line of scrimmage if they even stand a chance against Memphis.
Yeah, I think you pretty much took the words out of my mouth. That run game is going to be big for Charlotte. And in addition to that, I just want to see their quarterback play be a little bit better. That was one thing that they kind of went back on in some of their post-game recaps, that they were just like, I wish we could have seen a little bit better play from both Max Brown and Trexler Ivy. Yeah. And I think if they can turn that around a little bit, I think that's going to be key, the run game, the quarterback play, and then getting past that Memphis defense that, again, looked really good.
Yeah,
so.
Charlotte showed their weaknesses against the Navy offense because of the rushing yards that were allowed, because of their rushing defense. Allowing that amount of yardage, that amount of touchdowns was significant. Now, Memphis isn't as unique of a system as what Navy showed, but it's just as dynamic as a ground game. And Memphis will score points. Navy, Memphis, Tulane, the 3 games on the Charlotte schedule, back to back to back. I feel bad for the run defense, but they're going to have to step up and show some level of physicality this week.
Yeah, and I think when we talked to Hassan Wilson, was it 2 weeks ago? All the weeks are running together. We said, you have a pretty big schedule coming up, and he's like, we feel confident, and I'm excited to see them play some of those matchups, because I think that when the run game is good for Charlotte, it clicks on all cylinders. So we'll have to see how it all plays out.
But now you go from the dynamic runner of what Navy did as a rushing offense as a whole, and then you turn around and you go straight into what Mario Anderson can do from a running back position. So it's going to be a different challenge for Charlotte this week, and something that I think the 49ers will be up for the challenge initially, but a team like Navy just wears you down. They wear you down all the way through, but they're one of the more dynamic offenses in the American Athletic Conference. We kind of alluded to this earlier, but there's another offense that's been turning some heads as of late, and that's the North Texas Mean Green. As we welcome in our special guest of the week, James Westling, who is live from Kansas City, Missouri right now. James, you've been on the call for a couple North Texas games already this season. You got to see them against Wyoming, where they put up 44 points. Got to see them a week later when they had a 50-burger against Tulsa. I want to just start off your overall thoughts on what Eric Morris and company are doing, and of course you do great work with ESPN. Did you ever lose your voice in a couple of those matchups just because of the scoring capability from the Mean Green?
I did not lose my voice, but I will say there were some fourth quarters that kind of drug on because we were tired and they were longer games, and that's one thing about UNT. They throw the ball so much and they score so much that when you have North Texas, you know that you're in for a long night. So there's no post-game plans that can ever be made.
James, you've gotten to see some dynamic offenses across the board, and your season is just getting started too. We're halfway through this thing. Long way to go. But where would this North Texas offense rank against some of the teams that you've had the opportunity to see so far this season?
Well, I think they would rank definitely towards the top. They are dynamic. They're explosive. Eric Morris has done a great job of not just picking up yards through the air, but really his system is built around balance. You know, they run the ball at a very efficient clip. They averaged over 6 yards per carry in their loss to Memphis. And I think that's maybe the underrated part of what they do offensively, are just their schemes and their ability to run the football. You know, they're one of 3 schools in the entire country that rank in the top 10 in scoring offense, total offense, and passing offense. So they're in elite company offensively. I just really like the scheme that they have offensively. I like their playmakers. I think they have a really underrated quarterback in Chandler Morris. And so all that to say, they're legit offensively. They're a really, really explosive offense and truly one of the best in the country.
You know, you mentioned Chandler Morris and him being underrated, but he's starting to get a little bit more of that national recognition. What do you think has made him so good this season?
Well, I think everybody sees his yards and his touchdowns and his completion percentage. But for me, I look at how he's led this football team. He's had a couple of games this year where, you know, maybe he didn't have a ton of plays in which he was sacked, but he was taking a beating. The game I had earlier this season against Tulsa, he ended up on his backside play after play. Actually had to come out of the game because he had a spot on his elbow that was bleeding heavily. And he came back in and led his team to a blowout win. So I just think his resilience, all the locker room intangibles that you want from your quarterback, he has. And then the other thing that I'll say about Chandler Morris is he's a really underrated runner. When he gets out of the pocket, you have to account for his scrambling ability. He doesn't run it much, but when he does it very effectively. So he's quicker than people think. I think he has a 20-plus mile an hour top speed. So he's got underrated speed and acceleration and scrambling capabilities that I think a lot of people don't recognize when they look at his game big picture.
And then another player I wanted to ask you about was DT Sheffield. I mean, he has had such an impact on this North Texas team. What have you liked from him?
Yeah, he's another dynamic playmaker. He's incredibly fast. They're very creative in how they get him the football. They targeted him 14 times against Memphis. He had 8 catches for 122 yards and a couple of touchdowns. His yards after catch are always off the charts because of, how they get him in space. And the other thing about DT Sheffield is he has found a home at North Texas. He transferred from Washington State where he had some off the field stuff and it just really wasn't a great fit for him. He goes back a long ways with UNT head coach Eric Morris. And so I think it's the perfect system for him because he's quick and he's shifty and he's explosive, and they kind of use him like a running back on the edge in their screen game, which is a big part of what they do offensively. So, he's a guy that's very difficult to tackle in space, and I think UNT does a great job of using him and using his strengths to make him a big part of this offense.
I thought one of the craziest stats was the fact that against Florida Atlantic, he went over 1 minute and 40 seconds of gameplay. He scored 2 touchdowns to help North Texas win that game in Boca Raton in the rain. Sloppy game all the way down to the wire it went, and it was DT Sheffield that emerged. What did he do as an encore? Well, the first 2 plays from scrimmage against the Memphis defense, which is highly regarded as one of the best in football, at least in the American Athletic Conference. He goes back-to-back plays of 75 yards, a reception and a rush for 75 yards, and he takes it to the house. He's so dynamic. I actually wrote a note when I was watching the film. I was like, he reminds me of a college football version of Tyreek Hill because of the way that teams have utilized him and his speed and his dynamic ability. Is this comparable to some of the things that you've seen out of some of those next-level playmakers?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison just in terms of the way that these guys play at the receiver position. And the receiver position has changed so much in college football from what it used to be.
Yeah.
And North Texas leads the nation in 70-plus yard plays. Not 20 or 30 or 40. We're talking 70-yard plays. They have one just about every game.
Yep.
They had a 97-yard touchdown catch earlier this year on another screen play. And that's what makes them so dangerous with guys like DT Sheffield. All it takes is 1 or 2 missed tackles, and then these guys turn on the jets, and they're impossible to catch. And it's not just him. They have a lot of different playmakers kind of that fit that same mold. The last thing I'll say about Sheffield is Eric Morris really challenged his star receiver on being more physical, making more catches over the middle. And he's done that. He's effective on the edge, but the reason why we've seen such an uptick in his production when it comes to his stats is he's finally a guy that is just as dangerous over the middle in traffic. He's got great hands, and he's got a quarterback that, even though Sheffield's not the biggest guy, Chandler Morris is so accurate that if there's even the smallest of windows, Morris is going to deliver a strike.
It's going to be one of the more interesting offenses to see as the season goes along. But they've got another matchup this week. Talked about the 40-plus points against Memphis. That's one thing. Check the box. They've got a matchup with Tulane this week that's going to catch the eyes of the nation. And before we get into the preview between the Green Wave and the Mean Green, I want to talk about the game you called this past week, Tulane and Rice. A win for the Tulane Green Wave, but it wasn't necessarily pretty the whole time from Tulane, a team that at least is regarded as one of the top teams in the league. What did you think about the way that Darian Mensah battled through that game? Rice kept it close, and then ultimately it was Tulane that came away with the win.
Yeah, I think that there were a lot of positives to take away for both teams. Rice is getting a lot better. They had that heroic come-from-behind win over UTSA in the final seconds 2 weeks ago. And then, as you said, they really battled against Tulane. This was anybody's ball game at halftime. But Tulane, they are the takeaway kings in college football. They beat teams with turnovers, and they do a really good job of, when they get turnovers, turning those into points. They're one of the best teams in the country and actually capitalizing on those opponent mistakes. They're aggressive, they're physical, they're disciplined. And that was the difference in this game. It's a 2-touchdown game. It's a tied game going into the fourth quarter. And Rice had 4 turnovers, and Tulane had none. And all of Tulane's points came off of those owl blunders, including a late-game scoop and score that was kind of the dagger in that contest. So really, I was impressed by Tulane's resilience things were not going their way. They had a lot of penalties. They couldn't get their ground game going until the fourth quarter. They had 4 drops, 2 of them touchdowns in the first half. So there were just a lot of un-Tulane-like things that were happening in that game, but great teams find ways to win even on their worst of days. And that's what Tulane did to stay unblemished in conference play.
All of those mistakes start to add up, but as you said, Tulane was resilient. How do you think they kind of clean those up as they head into their matchup this week?
Well, I think the first thing you have to look at are penalties. They had an offensive lineman that got flagged 3 times in the first half, which was very uncharacteristic of him and that group up front. They're usually just rock solid, protecting their quarterback. It's a veteran offensive line. Darian Mensah does not play like a redshirt freshman. He was the 3rd string quarterback coming into camp, and he just kind of slowly kept getting a little bit better and a little bit better. He's one of the hardest workers on the team. He has a very business-like attitude in his approach, and he plays like a guy that's been at Tulane for years. So it's easy to forget that he is still a redshirt freshman. In the fourth quarter, Tulane really leaned on their ground game. Mekhi Hughes had over 100 yards in the second half. He had more yards in the third and fourth quarter by himself than Rice did all game long rushing the football. And so Tulane just kind of flexed their muscles in the fourth quarter. And I think that, the biggest thing are the penalties and then the drops. Mario Williams had 3 drops in this game.
Yeah.
The USC transfer at receiver, that is very uncharacteristic of him. One was over the shoulder that I think he lost in the sun because it hit him right in the face mask. It would have been a walk-in touchdown. Tulane ended up getting no points on that drive. So little things like that, I think, is what separated Tulane from, winning in a more Tulane-like manner. The drops and the penalties are the 2 things that stood out to me.
Yeah, so they'll have to clean some of those up. But as you said, the Tulane defense, and we talked just recently about that North Texas offense. So when you see those 2 going up against each other, what are some of your thoughts on this game that's about to happen on Saturday?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing will be the turnover battle. Chandler Morris, who's been nearly flawless all season long and not making turnover-worthy plays, he's incredibly efficient, but this will be his biggest test because Tulane, they're never out of alignment. They know their assignments. They don't have a bunch of guys, when you look at their defense, that just, jump off the chart at you statistically, but they're just so balanced. They have no weaknesses defensively. And so I think, Tulane, who's had a turnover now in almost 30 straight games, I think they've won 23 of their last 25 when they get a turnover. If they force some North Texas mistakes and can get some extra possessions against that high octane, up-tempo North Texas offense, I think that's how Tulane wins the game. And then for UNT, they have to take advantage of opportunities. Tulane is one of the top teams in the country in time of possession. They're a ball control offense. They're going to want to milk that clock and keep Chandler Morris and that North Texas offense off the field. And so for North Texas, they need to take advantage of the drives that they do get. When you go tempo, you can't afford 3 and outs. You can't afford these 90-second drives where you're giving the ball right back to Tulane, who can milk 6 or 7 minutes off the clock. So I think North Texas has to be efficient offensively and avoid the turnover bug. And for Tulane, they've got to find a way to create some extra possessions, either via turnovers or special teams. I think that's what'll decide the game.
It's going to be a fun one, no doubt about it, and a one that in Denton, Texas, and that crowd and the way that things can kind of start snowballing. North Texas with some explosive plays early. It's the new age air raid versus the new age West Coast, and you've got one of the most explosive offenses against one of the more explosive defenses. James, we appreciate you as always. You'll be on the call this weekend for ESPN Plus, the UTSA Tulsa matchup up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Good luck the rest of the way. Appreciate you stopping by, All-American.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
There he goes, James Westling. Be sure to follow him in all of his endeavors, and he does a great job. And talked about it there. This North Texas team is predicated off of scoring and scoring quickly, whereas Tulane, they dominated the time of possession against Rice by almost 10 minutes, and that's really what they do with Mekhi Hughes, that defense, and then forcing turnovers and getting the ball back for their offense. And
it's just that aggressiveness, too, and I think that's one thing that really stands out to me about just Tulane as a whole, not just individually as individually offensively or individually defensively, they just have this presence about them, and I think that's the way that they can kind of frazzle teams a little bit. So I'm excited to see how North Texas responds to that. I think it's going to be a really good game.
It's going to be a fun one. Last two meetings between these two, actually the only two I could find, 2013, 24-21, Tulane. Last year, in the first year as both of them in the same conference, at least in the American, 35-28. So each game has been separated by one possession. I don't expect anything less from this one this weekend in Denton. Moving on to our next matchup and next team to highlight. How about the Temple Owls getting a win this past weekend, 20-10 over Tulsa? Speaking of a nitty-gritty football game, this is a big win for the Tulsa confidence, and they needed this one, or the Temple confidence in the win over Tulsa.
And I was so excited for them, right? You know, you want to see somebody get their first conference win, and Temple was the team to do it here, and it was just back and forth the entire game, right? They just kind of put their nose down and was like, we're going to figure out a way to win a football game. And I think that kudos to Temple figuring out a way to get the victory.
Yeah, Evan Simon dealing early on. He didn't really have a ton of pressure from the front seven from the Tulsa Golden Hurricane that first half, and he took advantage of that by having time to throw. They found the end zone on the ground for the first time of the season, in the entire 2024 season. Therese Worthy finally finds pay dirt on the ground. First rushing touchdown for the Temple Owls, which I think it says two things. One, that shows kind of the stagnant one-way offense, one-trick pony that the offense has been for Temple. But also it shows the trust that they have in Evan Simon as a quarterback. And he showed why that trust is significant in this win against Tulsa. Then they've got a matchup this weekend against East Carolina that's going to turn some heads as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. You know, East Carolina has a new person at the helm of their program. So I think there's a little bit of turmoil there that Temple can maybe capitalize on a little bit. You know, they're in more of a situation where they have some consistency with their coaching staff. And so now can they use the momentum from their victory and some of the things that ECU is dealing with?
Yeah, ECU, it really comes down to me, which defense plays better in the first half? Who do you allow to get off to a better start in this matchup? Because East Carolina can score points. We've already talked about that. Temple is a team that has struggled to score points traditionally, and they put up the 20 points against Tulsa. They need more than 20 points to beat ECU. I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there at the moment. But these two offenses can score, but it may take a little time. For instance, ECU did not get their offense going until the second half. Now they gave up. They went ahead and scored the most amount of points that Army has given up in a game this season. Temple has struggled to get the ball rolling in the first half pretty much all year, but they were up 17-0 against Tulsa. They just have to continue that into the second half of this matchup. Whichever defensive unit cracks first or shows some cracks first, I think it's going to be the team to fall in this ball game, and I think it's going to be a back and forth. ECU, it's tough because you want to say that they're playing for their coaching staff, which they probably are. And we talked about Mike Houston a little bit earlier in the news that came down from ECU. I don't want to harp on it any more than we already have, but I do think there's an element to it of chip on the shoulder. The Pirates are a better football team than this, and they feel like they should win this football game, whereas Temple is playing for their head coach in the same way.
Yeah, no, and I think you bring up a really good point, too, about ECU's offense, because they've had some points in the season where they looked good, right? Even that loss against Charlotte where it looked bad, I think that they had some moments where, you thought that maybe things were going to get going. And so interested to see that matchup. But another team who picked up their first conference victory this weekend was UTSA against Florida Atlantic, and I know that was an exciting game that you were pretty stoked to watch as well.
I was so excited to see UTSA back at the UTSA level that we kind of anticipated. Finally, a game where the Roadrunners put it all together. Give credit to FAU, though. They played tough. They played all the way up and down. They did not lay down. But the problem was they could not block for Cam Fancher behind the line of scrimmage. He had zero time to run, or zero time to throw, and he had to resort to running initially. He had the big run early on, but that was because he was forced to use his legs all day long. Never really had time to set his feet and throw, and you saw that from the way that this defense got after FAU. Front seven was electric. 7 sacks from UTSA. 8 different players. Brandon Brown, Owen Peewee. both of those guys were incredible. They had a sack and at least 2 tackles for loss, and of course, Pee Wee had the interception as well. This was a complete win for Jeff Traylor's bunch and something that they needed desperately against a team like FAU, who also needed a win.
Yeah, and I feel for FAU, right? Because they had that loss last week where, again, Cam Fancher looked so good, right?
He's looked good the last 2 weeks. I
know, and I feel bad because then you just don't get those wins in the right column, right? But, I mean, you mentioned that UTSA defense. I thought offensively, too. Owen McCown, we said that he looked good the week before as well. He had 26 of 45, 340 yards, 2 touchdowns. He looked really good, and I think that helped UTSA as well. I'm previewing it a little bit, but there's one play that involves Owen McCown that I think we're going to see a little bit later on. So I think for UTSA, just a really big win for them.
Yeah, he looked like a completely different quarterback. Still threw 2 interceptions. It wasn't perfect from McCown, but he got sacked a couple times there as well. You take a look at the numbers here. But the way that he was throwing with confidence, the way that he was stepping up into the pocket, his offensive line did a great job, I thought, of blocking things up in front of him, and it's a big reason why he was an All-American Conference honorable mention this past weekend. The thing for me is whatever Jeff Traylor is doing to his ball club and saying to his ball club going into matchups inside the Alamo Dome, it's working. They're 26-3 at home underneath Jeff Traylor. That's an incredible number. 14th win in the last 15 contests inside the Alamo Dome. It is a tough place to play. And if McCown can play like that confidence level-wise on the road, it'll be tough to take down UTSA. This is still a talented football team. I've said that all the way through the year. Some of the UTSA fans that have been in my mentions all year long, I get your frustration. I felt it too. I thought this was a team that could contend up there with the Memphises, with the Tulanes, with the Armies and the Navies of the American Athletic Conference, and they just haven't been that. Does that mean they're not talented? No, they can still make a bowl game. They have all that still in front of them. And in this win really does give them a little bit of breathing room to get it done. Now, things don't get easier. They've got to get going. They've got Memphis and North Texas coming up. They've got a trap game this week in Tulsa because they could be looking ahead and saying, okay, you've got Memphis next week. You've got a bye week, and then you've got North Texas. This Tulsa matchup, they cannot sleepwalk through because Tulsa's desperate, just like UTSA was this past weekend.
Well, you kind of took the words right out of my mouth, that desperation from Tulsa looking for that first conference win. I think that's something that's going to bring a little bit different energy to their game as well. And so UTSA, how do you respond to the way that you walked away victorious, right? So how can you use that momentum to get yet another one against Tulsa and give you more momentum heading into those really big top of the conference matchups? And again, you don't want it to be a trap game, as you said, Kyle.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You take a look at some of the numbers. It should be a very much so UTSA favored crowd. You should win this ball game if you're UTSA, and they cannot let up. Before we move on from UTSA and FAU, we didn't talk a whole lot about FAU, but I do want to give credit where credit is due. And I love this because sports is not always about the wins and losses. Sure, every team wants to win, and yes, winning is always more fun than losing, but this is following a loss. I want to give a shout out to the Florida Atlantic University Owls. There were multiple individuals that were a part of this. I saw this tweet from FAU_Owls_Nest, FAU Owls Nest, I get it. But these are players following a tough loss on the road inside the Alamo Dome to UTSA, having a moment with UTSA fans in orange, very clearly with the Roadrunner across the chest. They were giving out gloves and wristbands and all sorts of different things to the opposing fans. This happens more often than what's caught on camera, just because you're going to the tunnel. You're never going to use these things again. You give it to a fan, makes their day. I loved this more than you know.
I just love the sportsmanship of it, right? And I think also, too, a lot of people have played sports in your life, right? Yeah. But to actually lose on the road, and that's like a second straight loss where it's a little bit gut-wrenching, right, for FAU. And the fact that your first thought is, oh, my goodness, I'm going to give this to a young kid, or I'm going to interact with someone. I know for me, that's the last thing that you want to do after any loss, let alone after your second consecutive one in the way that you did. And I think that just speaks volumes to the football players at FAU and the way that they conduct themselves and handle themselves and the way that they interacted with not just young fans, but young opposing fans. And I think so much credit needs to be given to them. And I think that really gives me a lot of hope, too, for just the future of sports and the future of these student athletes when they go into the world and have careers beyond the football field.
They've got their head in the right spot, no doubt about it. And I think that's really cool to see because it's all about the future of the game. Growing, and that's what the American Athletic Conference is all about. It's the sportsmanship of it. Sure, you want to compete to win, no doubt, every day, and that you can do that while also having moments like this along the way. I think it's incredible. I mean, I grew up in Waco, Texas. I was a huge sports fan growing up. I was a big Baylor baseball fan. That was kind of our big thing in Waco was Baylor athletics, and I was a baseball guy. I grew up a baseball fan, and I remember going to a game, and I was sitting on the berm that they have in the ballpark, and a Nebraska catcher, Nebraska, it had nothing to do with Nebraska Cornhuskers. They gave me a baseball on the side. I was wearing a Baylor T-shirt, gave me a baseball, and I remember that to this day. I was probably 6-7 years old.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, you have that front of mind,
exactly.
and like now you work in sports and you go on to impact people in different ways, and just
Try
those, just you do, just in those small moments that student athletes just take the time to think about it. And sorry
really
to interrupt
cool.
you, but I just love that. That's awesome.
No, really cool, and I think that speaks to the excitement about it. I just wanted to shout that out. That was my doing. I sent it in the group message. I think it was really cool. All right. We've got a whole nother week of action. We had a great week last week where every team was in action. Not the case this week. Army, UAB, South Florida, FAU all taking the weekend off. But that doesn't mean we don't have some good ones cooking up in the American Athletic Conference. Which game on this first page of games are you looking forward to the most?
All of them. No, I'm just kidding. I am looking forward to all of them. We already talked a little bit about that Tulane North Texas matchup because I think that is something I am very excited about. Navy Notre Dame. That's gonna be the one.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's gonna be fun. Ranked matchup inside MetLife Stadium. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I'm really excited to see what the Navy midshipmen are going to do on this one. Now, because of that, I want to shift the conversation into the playoff, college football playoff. We started the year. Morgan Uber and I were talking about the possibility of some of the American teams getting in the mix. Here is what the playoff projector says, according to the college football playoff. Army, right up there, 25%. Now, they're 7-0. They've already kind of run the table in the American to a certain extent. They've got some tough games coming up. It's not easy for the Army Black Knights, but there are some teams lurking. Tulane right there, 8.7%. Navy is right there. These teams, by the way, are second, fourth, and fifth in terms of the overall ESPN playoff projector. Only Boise State, who's sitting up there at the top with Heisman candidate Ashton Jeanty, is ahead of Army. And then in between Army and Tulane is UNLV. Those two teams, Boise State and UNLV, play each other this Friday night. Kind of interesting to take a look at.
I know, and I know you're going to be watching that game very intently,
Very much so.
intently as well. But when you see whatever the outcome is of that game, they're going to knock each other off, and that's going to give those American teams a chance to maybe slide into some of those higher positions. And so I'm excited about that. So we got to keep an eye on that one as well. I know this is all American, but that's a game that maybe we should have previewed as well.
Yeah, maybe so.
Maybe.
Yeah, those are two of the teams that, of course, is the highest group of 4 or group of 5, whatever you want to call it now, non-Power 5. Power 4 conferences that get up there.
That hurts my head.
I don't like it either.
Teams,
but
they're all football teams.
Ranked conference champions.
Yes.
Things to keep an eye on, and that's one to certainly do it. That one out of the Mountain West, of course, UNLV's had a great season. Ashton Jeanty and Boise State are one of the more electrifying, if not the most electrifying offense in all of football right now. Cannot wait for that matchup, but it does have a significant impact on what happens inside the American Athletic Conference. And just to be known, there's a helmet sitting behind you over there, Maria. It's gray and blue and has a big old tiger that is engulfed in an M. Lurking. That Memphis team is just off to the side, right out of sight, out of mind with one loss, and they have a ranked win. I know it's Florida State, and that team looks pretty bad right now. It was ranked when they did it. So they have a ranked win, and they'll have a chance for a couple more down the stretch. But don't count out the Memphis Tigers just yet, a team that, by the way, is also bowl eligible for the 11th straight year.
Yeah, I think the lurking analogy is the best one, and they're not on that graphic.
Ready
that we
to
just
pounce.
Had. They are.
Like a tiger.
I know. Well, That was good.
Yeah.
That was really good. Did lose to Navy, but man, they looked pretty good last week as well. So.
And Navy's a top 25 team, so keep it in mind. You got to continue moving on.
Gray and blue, colors of the Memphis Tigers. And, we talked about Basketball Media Day last week on All-American, and we actually played a game with some of the student athletes where they had to guess the colors of the conference schools. So I decided that you should try to do that because you were really confident.
I'm going to get this all right.
Yeah, you thought that you were going to get every single one right, and I think that's completely wrong.
Is this all three colors at a time?
No. Let me explain it to you.
Okay. All
right. So we're going to see one color on the board. You got to try to guess it.
Okay.
If you don't,
right off the jump.
Right off the jump.
Okay.
If you don't, then you get a second color.
Sounds good.
If not, you get a third color.
Okay.
And we're going to see how many that you can get right because you sounded really confident.
I'm super confident.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll see how that goes. There's a lot of green teams in the American.
There are a lot of green teams. That's what's kind of worried. That and the Navy, like you got like Rice and UTSA, and like I'm a little worried about the Navy aspect because Navy's actual Navy, capital
Navy.
in.
Well,
Navy.
they're not basketball, so.
Oh, that's true.
So
so this isn't going to be in the mix. Good to know. You shouldn't have told me that.
I know. We'll see. I know. I should have let you be confused.
You should have let me say.
Should have let it be bad.
Navy, yeah.
Or is it? Am I just confusing you even more?
Maybe so.
I don't know. I guess we'll find out. All right, let's get it started.
Okay.
Right. What do we got, Kyle?
Right this second, I'm thinking Charlotte. Ooh. Or USF.
Final answer.
I'm going to go Charlotte because of the white. I'm going to go Charlotte right off the jump. Bang.
All right.
Okay.
1 for 1.
Got it.
Let's see
that
the
green
next
is
one.
that green is tough.
There's
okay,
Navy.
there's the
Hurry
Navy
up.
blue. Florida Atlantic. Right off the jump. Florida Atlantic. FAU. Oh no, it's UTSA.
Wrong.
Oh,
Final
man.
answer.
It's
You are
totally
1
UTSA.
for 2. So you got that one wrong.
I mean, I got it like on the second color.
You were you should have waited then.
I know.
That's your own fault. I don't
Wait,
feel bad for you.
So if I guess initially, it counts like as a loss.
I'm counting it as a loss.
I thought I was trying to make it on the first one.
I just want you to lose.
That's
so
fair.
that's
Okay.
why I'm saying you're 1 for 2
Once
right
the orange
now.
popped up, it made it easy.
Okay, you're still 1
and
for 2.
Navy's tough.
You know what?
Back to green.
Back to green.
Ooh, that looks like a Tulane green. I'm not making. No, it's USF. It's
Final
South
answer.
Florida.
I'll
South
give
Florida
you
final answer.
South Florida final answer.
Final
all
answer.
right. 2 for 3.
It was either going to be between South Florida or Tulane. Tulane's is a little more like bluish green too.
Yeah, it's a different kind of green.
Yeah,
So I'll
it's a
give
little
you.
bit
I'll
different.
give you. But you were like really like set on your last one from number 2.
I was going straight after it for Florida.
Yeah. So that one's wrong. But you're
that one-
2 for 3.
Okay.
2 for 3. You got the greens
How
right.
many more of these do we have?
I guess you have to find out.
Oh, that's a bright blue. Is this back to Florida Atlantic? That's not a guess. No, that's Rice.
Final
Give me
answer.
Rice. Final answer. The
Final
Rice.
answer.
Owls.
Rice.
Yeah,
Ooh, 3
Rice
for
Owls.
4. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing a little bit better than I hoped you did.
The second color is pretty easy to me, but I'm trying to catch it off of this first one, and it's not as easy as I anticipated.
Exactly. I told you that.
That's a bright blue too. Tulsa. Right. Final answer. Tulsa. Right off the jump.
We gotta wait for the third color.
Oh, I gotta wait for the third
We gotta
color.
wait for the third color.
Oh, it's not. That's Florida Atlantic.
Ooh, 3 for 5.
I tried to go for the first one.
I know you, but see,
Man,
you're overconfident,
that's
and
tough.
that's how I knew that you were gonna.
I blame the brightness on our monitors in the studio.
Oh, so now you're making excuses.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, all right, no excuses.
All right, let's see. I'm going to get this
That's
last one right. Oh, no, this is Tulsa. Tulsa, final answer. Right, this last one's going to be red.
Okay.
Tulsa
so
Golden
4
Hurricane.
for 6.
4 for 6 and
4
one,
for 6.
one right off the first color
Okay.
is what I've got.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think 4 for 6. I'm a former softball player. If you go 4 for 6, you're pretty darn good. So
Now,
I hate saying that. I didn't want to give you that much credit.
yeah, that's fine. That was fun though. I liked it. We're gonna
had
have to try
fun.
that. You gotta test. There was another game you guys played where it was in the stadiums. You marked out the court of the stadiums.
Ooh, yeah.
And I've been in a decent number of American Conference stadiums, whether it's radio or TV or whatever it may be. So I'm interested to see how many of those I would get right. I think I'd be worse at that. I'd be shocked if I got 4 out of 6.
You think so?
In that regard,
I mean, I
yeah.
think that one's harder. I think the colors are a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But
Football stadiums would be hard too.
That'd be
for
really
me.
tough.
Yeah.
I would
we
struggle.
try it out.
We
Yeah.
maybe that's in a preview for another episode of All American.
I like it. Very nicely done. That was fun. Good job, y'all. Good job. All right. Before we wrap up here on All American, it's time now for our top plays of the week, starting with Number 5, Maria Trivelpeice. We go back to the ground game, that orange and blue of the Alamo City. UTSA, they've lacked firepower on offense throughout the year. Owen McCown says, how about this for firepower? Launches it up for Patrick Overmeyer in the end zone. The lefty launches it, and the big-time tight end comes down with it. 42 yards for the touchdown, putting the Roadrunners up 10-7 in the second quarter in that matchup. That was really tightly contested with Florida Atlantic.
I love that. Patrick Overmeyer just saying, give me the ball. He's like, I will.
In double coverage, too.
Right? He looked so good. I mean, and a great throw from Owen McCown. That's definitely deserving of a top play award for the week.
Love it.
But another team that had a top play worthy was heading over to Temple for some volleyball. Temple looking really good. Resiliency, another key word. We had a rally last week, some more rallies here. How about Charlotte at one point in this match went on a 10-0 run?
Wow.
But Temple coming back. You see a good dig right there. They keep it open. This is going to be set and match point. Serving it up right here for Sydney Jones. Boom. Kill.
Woo.
How about that? Temple wins.
I think that one might need to be a little higher.
You think so?
Yeah. You talking about match point?
I
With it
know.
being that tightly contested, that one's tough.
I know.
Credit
it was
to the
tough.
Temple Owls in that regard. Got it done.
I did.
Got
I
it done.
did.
All right, number 3, another week, another Bryson Daly top play in the American Athletic Conference. Captain America says this is about Glenn Powell, not Chris Evans, because he goes twisters on the defense of East Carolina. He says there ain't no love in West Point, New York, baby. I'm going twisters to the end zone and making it for 6 again. Not the only time Bryson Daly's made not only top plays, but he's found his way to pay dirt, one of the top rushing quarterbacks and rushing attacks in all of football across the board. Give me the Army Black Knights, baby. Bryson Daly does it again.
That might have been one of my favorite references that you've ever made. Wow, so perfectly executed. And speaking of perfectly executed, I guess, plays, we'll head over to the soccer pitch with Charlotte. This is Sydney Smith from midfield, Kyle, right into the back of the net.
Wow.
Do you know how much strength that takes to get that ball all the way?
She was
Look at that.
At the circle.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
How's
That's
that
why.
fair?
I don't know. Number 2 play for sure. I need that strength. I need like what her leg day regimen is because
Yeah.
I want to be that strong.
I bet it's significant. That's impressive. Yeah. Very nicely done, Sydney Smith. Charlotte's rolling on the soccer pitch, by the way. All right. Final one of the day. Let's go to Annapolis. Charlotte Navy, midshipman already up big. Deshaun Peel undercuts the route, takes it 60 yards to the house. Big-time play from the Navy defender, but guess what? He wasn't done just yet. Few drives later, he drops back in coverage. His second interception of the day, but there's no way he's going to take this back to the house, right? Wrong. He's going all the way back through that Charlotte team, back and forth, weaving his way in and out of offensive players, and then he just barrels over a guy at the end zone. Ain't no regard for human life in the Navy defense. They take it all the way back to the house, not once but twice. Credit Deshaun Peel, back-to-back pick sixes. First one in the American Conference to do so.
He looked so fast on those. I think that was my favorite part. I know, but it was just like the strength, the physicality, and the speed. It's like the perfect way, to not get 1 but 2 pick sixes in a game.
Second American Conference player, I should say. First in Navy history. I had my notes backwards.
Yes.
But regardless, incredible stuff from the Navy midshipmen and the defense as well. The midshipmen have had everything working in their favor. Annapolis is a tough place to play right now, and it's because of that defense and the tone that they set.
The defense, the offense. We covered so much Army and Navy today. Kyle, oh my goodness, what a show of All-American.
I feel like I'm a little tired.
I'm a little,
I
I think what was it, pre-show? I was like leaning
leaning
backwards.
back
I think
in
I'm
the
going to need a nap
chair.
after that show for sure.
There's a lot going on.
Yep.
A lot going on. But guess what? We'll be back next week. Break it all down for you. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. Click the little bell button there, too. Get some alerts for whenever All-American and all these different American Athletic Conference videos come out throughout the week. You guys do a phenomenal job of continuing the social content, moving on, and the broadcasting content as well. Zach in the back, Maria Trivelpeice as always. I'm Kyle Youmans. That does it for us in another edition of All-American. We will be back next week and a whole lot more to talk about here from Studio A.